Hello, and welcome back to Being Miraculous, a podcast by Shweta Shibraman. For those of you tuning in for the very first time, Being Miraculous is a podcast to inspire and live life to its fullest through my journey of self-discovery. Miraculous is the derivative of the Greek word meraki, which means to do an act with complete willingness, undivided attention, and wholehearted devotion. This podcast is a reminder of how we're not alone in this journey and on the simple things we can do to make this life a memorable and a beautiful experience. Today, we are going to be speaking about embracing vulnerability with a very special person I had a chance to interact with through Instagram, coincidentally. And we are going to be talking about embracing vulnerability. And I have with me Prakash from This Is Me, an award-winning documentary that opened up conversations about mental health, disabilities, caregiving. I'm going to let Prakash introduce himself. Thank you so much, Prakash, for being a part of this show. Would you like to share your story with the audience here?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me. So my name is Prakash. I'm based in London. The video, documentary, and so many other things that we've done accordingly falls under the banner of This Is Me, official This Is Me. So if anyone wants further information, they can go to officialthisisme.com. It's basically to highlight a topic which is close to my heart, which is hardly ever spoken about. And that's the mental health side and the things that really go on for carers of people who've got special needs, learning disabilities, or even just carers generically. I mean, at some point we're all going to have to take care of, say, our parents, or we take care of other family members. Now, that's great for a couple of days, but there's a large segment of society globally that do it on a regular basis, and some, such as myself, who have been doing it from the day that they can remember. So it's just to really highlight what it's about, some of the trials and tribulations that we do go through, for which I'm sure we'll go into in more detail later on.
Right. Thank you so much for being a part of this, Prakash. And for those of you who've not already checked out the documentary, I would definitely recommend going and looking at. They have a link linked from officialthisisme.com, and I was very, very touched the first time I saw the video. It really moved me, and also I think there was a whole raw vulnerability to it in terms of how you portrayed it. I think that really touched me a lot, and which is why we are also talking about embracing vulnerability here. So Prakash, just if we were to rewind back a little bit, what made you open up and speak about this? I'm sure when you started this conversation, it would not have been a very welcome conversation in the society.
In society, not so much. Society actually surprised me when I started opening up about this conversation. So what led up to it, or the combination of the video and what came before that, was in a case study for a UK charity who have been set up for the well-being and support of brothers and sisters of those who have special needs and learning disabilities. So about 4.5 years ago, I had to undergo quite a intense surgery. And it was during my recovery period where I was trying to look for avenues and information of support, because I became very mindful that should something ever happen to me in the future, who then takes care of my brother and sister who've got special needs? Is it something that the government or the local state would have to take over, or is there other avenues that we can pursue to have other people take care of them? So it was just more through my research that we came across this charity. I had a conversation with them and realized that there wasn't that many people from the Asian community per se who were at a national conference which I attended. So I thought, okay, there's definitely something here. Maybe it's something from a cultural point of view. And we have such a wide, diverse, nourishing culture. But there's also something within that culture, for some strange reason, from my own perspective, that doesn't allow us to open up and just be vulnerable. We're so busy trying to be that doctor or that engineer or that lawyer or having the right house or having the right X, Y, and Z. I mean, the list is endless. It's hard to keep up with it sometimes. So for me, it was like, okay, there's something here. I'm not really doing much sitting down. So let me just express myself. And I'm not a writer by any means. It's what I've put together is definitely not something that came overnight. So I created the case study for the charity after their request. They loved it. They came back to me a couple of weeks later and asked me to present it at the national conference, which I did. But they also had asked me to potentially consider writing a script for it or turning it into a video. Now, it's one thing writing your story. It's one thing having your story inside your head and staying inside your head, because then it's just yours. It's your own little treasure trove of thoughts. No one else touches it. So you can go with the good, the bad, it doesn't matter. But the minute it's out there, even words to an extent isn't so bad. But the minute you put visual representation to it is when it gets very close to home. So I had a discussion with a couple of friends about it, of which the owner and director of Kick Action Films, who helped produce the video. And incidentally, like many things, or like any great man, there's an even stronger woman. So it was actually the women, my wife, and the owner of Kick Action Films, his wife, we all pretty much sat down together and said, you know what, let's just do it. And just over a year ago, the video went live, and the rest has been amazing.
And when we were speaking about this earlier as well, I remember you mentioning the name, right? How did you come up with "This Is Me"?
I mean, it's one of those statements that resonates with everyone, right? So we all said in whatever contents of life that we go through, I think those three words really resonate. That this is me, this is what I want to do, whether we're talking, or I know from my experience, talking to, say, my parents, saying this is what I want to do as a child growing up, this is what I want to do, or this is the person I want to marry, or this is the car that I want. This is me, this is what I want. And this is something carers, especially sibling carers, find it hard to actually open up and express, because we're so busy taking care of other needs that we put our own health, our own wants to the back of the list, because we're so indirectly conditioned to making sure others have what they need. So after a lot of toying with ideas and different concepts of what should we name it, and we've had some outlandish ideas, as you can imagine when three boys get together. We want it to be funky, we want it to be cha-cha, really bling, stand out there. And the name actually came just as I was leaving, and I was like, look guys, at the end of the day, this is my story. It is as it is, it's not going to change. I was like, this is me. In the moment the video name was made, like, exactly, it is you. And those three words resonated across everyone.
Right, and I think it's so powerful, right? Because it could just be anybody, right? And that was the message that you were trying to bring across, that it could be you, me, it could be in different contexts and situations, but actually creating and opening up a space for people to have those conversations. And
and that's what it's all about, having those conversations. And it doesn't matter where you're from in the world, or what your background may be, or what your start may have been. It's irrelevant. At the end of the day, we're all humans. I've met so many people and had so many fantastic conversations similar to what we're having now with people from all over the world. And they've gone through similar stories. And at some point within those conversations, they've said those three words. regardless of being directly contributed to the discussion about the work that I've done. So it just shows that there's something there. Be it those who are able to directly speak English or those who are not able to speak English, but in their own individual languages, those three words still have the same resonance and same impact.
Just out of curiosity, when you initially started having these conversations, how did it go in the first couple of months when you were opening up this conversation?
I was really surprised and overwhelmed. I think that's probably the best way of describing it. See, at the beginning, the video, now the script, wasn't written by myself. I had written the case study initially. I handed over the script to Kick Action Films, and both Narinder and Jax put it together. Jax did all the directing, and he was the main vision behind everything. So the script was done solely by him. So mass kudos to him. And these are people who don't have a direct understanding of special needs and learning disabilities. So for two people to come across, take an idea, which effectively it was for them, conceptualize it and put it into what came out as the YouTube video was fantastic. It's still, even today, I keep asking him, how have you got to this level? I want to tap into that part of your brain. So in terms of the conversations, they were a lot easier than I had anticipated. A lot of men, different ages from my community, from my close friend network. Some would send me an email, some would SMS me, some would even call me and say, we just want to give you a hug. And these are guys who are proper macho guys. And like, are you feeling okay? Like, why did we never know this? We've known you for so long. Have you ever asked? No, because it's always a situation and condition that human nature is in, that we're constantly thinking about what next. That people become more like a herd. We follow, but you don't take that moment to just be present in someone else's world. I had one who's very well known in South India, a college friend who's become extremely successful, very well known. And he said, look, I always knew about your brother, but I never knew about your sister. Why did you never tell me? Okay, at what point in 4 years of being in university were you willing to have that conversation? You weren't, because we're either too busy studying or we're too busy partying, enjoying just being in university, meeting people, sense of freedom away from being from home, right? Who wants to have these conversations about what people are really dealing with? So that's where it all came up, and ever since I'm having conversations with people, even within my own internal family and people in the local community who I used to maybe walk past when I used to go for a walk, who are now seeing the video and they're all like, why did we never know? Again, we're not conditioned inherently to be asking about other people's family. This is something that has been well documented. You've got people like Abraham Lincoln who documented it in his autobiography, that human nature are too busy talking about themselves that you never stop to understand and really gauge what the other person is. So when we ask how is someone, that how are you lasts for maybe a couple of minutes. Somewhere we will try and find a way to say, oh, we did this, all those things. But you never actually stop to really understand and take in what the other person has just said. And that could be the difference between someone opening up and just being extremely vulnerable and you really understanding that person. Or you think, oh, that person's very quiet, or that person's very noisy. So there's a very thin line between the two.
Right, absolutely. And I think most of the conversations that we have today, especially, it's just, hello, how are you? And you're fine, I'm fine, all good, all right, and that's it. Sometimes I don't think we even ask the next level of questions saying what's happening or anything more, right? Even beyond the cursory conversations. And also I think there's something very, you don't actually want to open up and talk about real issues because it feels like you're putting yourself in the spot also, right? Saying I'm fine and walking away and wearing that mask is so much more easier than actually sitting down and talking about problems. And same the other way around, right? Who has the time today to listen to deep conversations, to not actually give solutions, but just be there and listen, right?
Yeah, completely. I mean, prime example, when a mobile phone dies and we're not having to look at the screen anymore, what do? We're twiddling our fingers because we're so bored. Yet, we all grow up without mobile phones. Even if it's for the first 5 years of our lives. Pick up a book, pick up a piece of paper, and start drawing something like that. And just doing something else to allow the mind to switch off. And I think from this whole process, it just got me very aware. And even conversations that I have with my parents, I'm in a better state now to have certain conversations about anything. And it makes no difference to me because I'm just sharing what I'm sharing, regardless of how it's interpreted. Whereas maybe previously, before the video, it's okay, if I say this, what will be said? If I say that, we're asking a lot of what if questions, when actually we should be saying, you know what, I have a voice. I have a place on this planet, in my community, in society, be it in work, be it socially, be it with friends. My voice is equally as important as everyone else, so why can't we not just share it? No, there's different ways of expressing those words. But the minute you show vulnerability within what you're saying, also does have an equally profound impact on others, where it creates that space of love and openness. Where I have a friend, well, actually it's my wife's circle of friends, but I never knew that she had a nephew who's got some sort of disability. I won't go into it, but it's only when I opened up and showed my vulnerability that she opened up and showed her. And then I was like, why have I never heard of this? And this is someone who's been through it, who I would think that, yeah, I've got all the tools. I know exactly vulnerability from a mile away. I couldn't. So that just shows the power of conversation, that we've become so conditioned to sending a quick message or sending a WhatsApp or a text message, whereas put that away and just have that one-to-one conversation, eyeball to eyeball conversation, and really get present into the other person's world. It's so powerful. It's extremely underestimated.
I remember when I'd first started podcasting, there was this one episode that I actually did when, I happened to actually look at, I had eye contact with strangers, which seemed very unnatural because it was after almost like, it felt new when I actually did that, right? It was just a regular casual networking event, and I realized I was staring into someone's eyes after a really long time because you're so used to looking at your gadgets, whether you're on your metro or your phone or your bus, your commute, you're always looking at the screen in front of you. And I was like, it feels strange to actually look at people and have a conversation. And now after COVID, I'm sure that's going to be norm, right? Because we are forgetting how it is to be social. We've hardly had conversations without devices. And, in a world where we are constantly correcting ourselves and filtering ourselves out, like you said, right? What will society think? What if they'll think that? What if I'm perceived this way? How did you find that courage to vulnerably show up for yourself?
I don't think I needed to go finding it. I just needed to realize that I actually had it. So, like I said at the beginning, I went through some surgery about 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago now. And within that, it gave me the time to sit back and just reflect on so many different things that I am proud of, I'm not so proud of. And as kids, we've all had those moments where we think, why did we even do that? Or when you look back at an old photo and you think, what was I wearing? Why did I think of such a... So you just look at it and you think, okay, you're now at a certain age where you're not trying to fit into your paper. You're not trying to fit into the realms of what society wants. Just be yourself. And the more you have these conversations, and it could be with those nearby, it could be with anyone you're close with, the more it just adds comfort and fuel to your own inhibitions and your own thought process. Like, you know what? It is as it is. It's okay. It's my world. It's my story. No one else can tell it. This is me. And what I found is having those conversations with people who I consider very dear friends, and really opening up to them. And there were some of them that didn't realize half the things that I went through. But it was only after opening up they realized, okay, now we understand why you do things in a certain way. And these are people who have maybe known me for 20 plus years. And for them to get those golden nuggets, and vice versa, within the conversation, they're able to open up. Because they now feel that connection with you, and they feel that a new level of vulnerability has been connected. So it allows them to open up. It allows, say, their husbands and their wives to open up. So as a friend circle, we've become a lot closer, a lot tighter. That if I'm having a bad day, non-work related at home, I can drop them a message. But I would prefer just to pick up the phone, even if it's just to hear the voice. Sometimes that's all you need to neutralize your bad day. So it's out of those conversations that have given me the courage to continue with what I'm doing.
What would you probably say to someone in the audience who's listening and who's not really had this support system or this forum where they could have such conversations with people around them? What can they do to open up?
I mean, for such people, first, there's no right or wrong answer to this, right? You can't really tell a person, you have to do this to open up, and then the world will open up. Because everyone's script is different. Everyone's ideas are different, experiences are different. And everyone's got different ways of portraying that, especially within their level of comfort, where they feel, I'm not so comfortable opening up. All we can say is, look, we've now created a platform where anyone is welcome to drop us an email and we will get back to yourself. But also, sometimes the courage will come from the most indirect way. So it may not be the closest or person who's going to be the most compassionate. And sometimes you've just got to allow yourself just to have those conversations and not prejudge what the other person is going to say. One of my biggest strengths came from someone I hardly ever knew. I had just recently met, but he saw the video, he picked up the phone, he called me as an international call, and he said, well done. It's amazing you've opened up because of everything that you've shared. And then he went on to share what he went through. So out of the video, and this is another reason why we continue doing what we're doing. So shortly after the video went live, we got a call from a UK charity to say that one of their participants was about to take their own life. And if it wasn't for the video and something that they saw within the video, they would have gone ahead and taken it. But there's something within the video for which we still don't know today that was able to turn their mindset to show that there is support, there are other avenues. And I believe even now they're having those conversations, and that just shows the effect. So if we're helping create a difference for one person, who knows how many people are connected to that one person. So it's 20, 30, 40 people, friends, family, colleagues connected to that one person. So it has a complete ripple effect. And just got to be open and honest. And there's no right or wrong with it, because culturally, especially from myself, particularly from the Asian community, we're so busy thinking that our culture says you can't do this, our culture says you can't do this, our culture says you have to do this and conform to X, Y, and Z. Yeah, that's great. But what is your culture not telling you? Or what is it that maybe our culture and community isn't openly telling us that we can do? And there's no right or wrong in any culture. But what I found is going back and looking at, say, some of the scriptures from my own community and upbringing, is there's a lot of unsaid conversations and unsaid statements within the various faith books that had never been told. Yet they were portrayed in a different tone and different statements to give the same outcome. But as a child, I wasn't in tune to pick up on that at that point, whereas now I am. So just trust in your own self, just love yourself, and just embrace yourself. Sometimes give yourself a hug. We can all give ourselves our own little hug, and that's fine. Sometimes that's all we need.
It's like we have forgiveness for almost everybody around us. We can accept things from our friends doing something, our family doing something, but when it comes to us, we always hold the bar a little higher. I've always noticed that in any conversation with everybody. I think it's just one of human nature. Like, we want it to be like the perfect embodiment of what we are, right?
And there's nothing wrong. We all try. We all have our wants, our goals, our aspirations for ourselves, society, culturally, whatever it may be. And there's nothing wrong in using those as driving factors to get to where we want to. But it's also not just about where we want to get to. It's also about the journey that we're on. And sometimes the journey we're on can give us more valuable insights into where we're going than the actual finish line and getting to that goal that we want.
Absolutely right. We always chase the destination with our blinders on, saying that only if we get there, we deserve all the other things that we talk about. But we miss out on what's the best part.
And it's something my grandfather used to tell me. And for some reason, as a kid, I used to love cars. Being a typical boy, I love my cars even now. But even then, he said, "Okay, so if tomorrow you had your dream car, that's great. But then what? What happens when the novelty, when you're going to want the next big thing or the next fancy car or flash car?" I think at the time we were going around in an Ambassador, which even till today I still look at and say, these are fantastic cars, because I've had so many amazing experiences within a good old Ambassador. So when I come to India even now and I see one, I was like, I want to get in that Ambassador. But Absolutely. You come to, say, the West, and you've got, similar to India now, but you've got BMWs, Mercedes, all these fancy cars around, and the novelty wears off. And it's the thing with human nature. When you achieve that goal or when you hit it, great. But if you haven't got a journey or the experiences to go with it, you're not going to appreciate it as much. And it's similar to what our teachers tell us when we're studying. Don't cheat, because you're only going to cheat yourself. And that's kind of a similar way that if you're only looking at the goal, you're going to cheat yourself about the journey.
Absolutely. And it's surprising how momentary that happiness is once you achieve it, because almost as soon as you get it, you're like, okay, what do I do now, right? Because it's the chase you're going after, exactly. Right? And once you get there, you're like, was this all there was? And then you go into a whole, is this it question?
Yeah, what next? What's the next big thing? And then you're going to spend the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years chasing the next big thing for that split second to say, okay, I've got this, now what?
Yeah. Beautiful. And, I remember what you had mentioned earlier in terms of that one person who was, about to take her life, who chose not to, for whatever reason, when she connected with it. And I remember when we were speaking earlier also, you had mentioned that conversations can change things, right? Was there such a conversation for you?
To that extreme, no, there was never. I mean, for myself, growing up in the UK, both myself and also my elder brother, I've got one other brother other than my two siblings, so there's four of us. So for us, we grew up in a time in the UK where it wasn't easy. We were in I wouldn't say a village, we were in a small suburb where you could count the number of Asian people on one hand, or the number of ethnically diverse, so non-UK. I never know what the right terminology for it is. In different countries, they say different things.
Right.
I don't want to offend anyone. So that itself was hard enough for us to try and embed and create something for ourselves and to fit in. And it would have been equally tough for my parents who had come over as immigrants, setting up in the UK, not having the family support or direct support and the infrastructure which we're so commonly attuned to in Asia. So that definitely was one of the biggest things for us, that okay, what do we have to do to try and fit into being per se a local, but also maintaining some sense of individuality for ourselves. So that one conversation which you had mentioned, so the gentleman who attempted to take his life, I've had various conversations with them indirectly, but for neither myself nor my brother were we ever in that position. We were given everything any child would ever want, and that's just to be loved. Those hugs, just that attention, because sometimes, and I've caught myself out from doing this, I've seen it happen before, when we are having conversations with children, and these things usually manifest from such a young age, that when a child comes up to their parent and says, and it could be aunts, uncles, it could be anyone, not just saying parents, but when they go up to the parent and the parent turns around and says, yeah, give me a minute, I'm finishing something, I'll come back to you. The child may wait, but if that happens 2, 3, 4 times, there's a void which is being created there. So that child then thinks that, okay, if I go and ask a question, I'm going to be ignored anyway, so what's the point of asking the question? Now, if it happens from a young enough point of view and on a regular basis, you're already creating a pattern for something which isn't helpful and isn't nurturing, because what you want a child to do is just be open, expressive, be loud, be irritating, be whatever a child must be. And children are so authentic that they will say the most random thing at the worst possible time sometimes. So as much as it gets every single adult in trouble, it's also the love that they have, because they are just being themselves, open, expressive, and authentic. So for us, we were always given that space, be it our grandparents visiting, be it my parents' colleagues who would used to come home on a regular basis, be it for traditional events that are happening or religious festivals, locally, maybe Christmas, New Year, that sort of thing. So there was a lot of different avenues where we felt as though we weren't alone. So we actually never had that level of thought, but I'm not denying it. It never has happened for others. I know one of my friends who actually had not a direct friend, but conversation to say that they thought about it when they were 4 years old. Can you imagine? You're 4 years old, you don't know anything about the world, and you want to have those sort of conversations. They're tough to swallow.
But I think what you mentioned about, children being authentic and finding it so easy for themselves to be themselves, I think they don't know any other way to be, right? I think as we grow up, we are, polished and we're taught how to be diplomatic in situations and, be well behaved. And I think we learn all the wrong things along the way. So
I don't think it's the wrong things. I just think our timing is very bad. The older we get, we think our timing is great, but actually our timing is so lousy. It's not even funny sometimes. And this is another thing which I heard growing up, that we spend so much time teaching kids to walk and to talk. We spend the first 2 years of any child's life teaching them to walk and talk. We spend the rest of their lives telling them to shut up and sit down. So it's kind of a contradictory statement. You spend 2 years encouraging, come on, let's talk, let's walk. Oh, they're crawling, great, let's get them to walk, and then they can do so much. And then you tell them to sit down and keep quiet. That doesn't really work.
that's beautiful, right? I never thought of it that way, but that's very, very true. So what would you tell our listeners today in terms of, why should they embrace vulnerability? I think we started the conversation saying embracing vulnerability. Why should someone embrace vulnerability?
It's an amazing thing, and it's such a powerful thing. For me, I can't embrace it enough now. And yes, there is a fine line between you embracing it authentically and embracing it for the sake of just being vulnerable to maybe get what you want or to do what you want, which also has its perks from time to time. But vulnerability is still an emotion that we all have. Just like laughing, just like being happy, excited, being sad, being vulnerable is equally part of that. So embrace it. Just like we embrace being sad, being happy, especially when you watch some movies. My God, it takes you through an emotional roller coaster, especially our Indian movies, for which you're thinking, why did I even think of watching these movies? It's either so bad that you still feel you have to watch it.
It's like they've taken a commitment to capture every area of emotions on the emotion wheel. It's not just one, it has to be all of it.
Yeah, and the end of that 2-3 hours, you will pick up a line from the movie, but you think, why did I watch it? So just like you feel the urge to watch certain things, just feel the urge to embrace that side of vulnerability, because there's nothing wrong in it. And I can assure you that the more you embrace it on a regular basis, the more it just helps neutralize things. Because as humans, we're like pressure cookers. We like to store and store and store, but it'll take one split moment where it will pop, and it will pop. And again, this comes back to what we were just talking about in terms of timing, that you could pop at that wrong time when you're supposed to be calm and neutral. So if you're embracing it on a regular basis and embracing all your emotions, but not just embracing it, understanding what it is that's causing you to feel that. What is causing you to feel upset? Is it the situation per se at the moment, or is it going back to something from the past? Which could be something as simple as a small little playground fight that you didn't really get closure on from being a child, or it could be a little spat we had with our siblings as a child. So to really embrace it and understand it, and from the understanding and embracing, it'll open up a lot more doors and avenues of complete freedom and tranquility in your own mind. And for me, if my mind is at ease, my world is at ease.
That's beautiful. Mind is at ease and the world is at ease. I love that. And also the conversation that you had, right? So reflect, spend some time understanding what is triggering and what is actually causing that feeling, right? Because usually when we feel bad, the first thing we do is shut ourselves off and, divert ourselves so that we feel happy and cheery again. And actually processing emotions is something most of us have probably stopped doing. And I think that's a great way to do it. And if I were to look at it from the other person's point of view, right? If somebody's actually opening up to you and is being vulnerable, tendency that we have is to come back and say, oh, everything's going to be okay, right? You want to solve, or you want to, feel useful. So you say probably all the wrong things at that point in time.
Yeah.
So what would you say for a listener who's who's on the receiving end of some vulnerable conversations.
Okay, there's a level of empathy that you can add to the conversation, but again, I don't want to get too bogged down on saying timing, but the individual will know when they need to step forward and say, put an arm around the shoulder and say, look, it's okay. Not to say, and the common thing that we all hear at any tough time is, if you ever need anything, call me. Okay, great. What happens when the person actually calls you and you're too busy? Or when you say, yeah, I'll call you back, but you never do. Could that be the moment that triggers something in that other person's world? I'm not saying that you have to suddenly drop everything and call them back, but it goes back to the child conversation that, are you attuned to what the child has actually asked? Or are you then creating something in that world? Because that person now may think, well, if I ask for help, that person never calls back anyway, so it's pointless of calling. So you're creating an indirect gap between two people who could actually be very close. And I had this conversation with someone a couple of years ago, and they didn't realize that they did it with someone else. I said, yeah, and that's created such a wide gap between the two of you. All it took was either a phone call or just a message. Hey, I can't talk on the phone, but can we message? You could be busy at work, it could be whatever. So it just allowing yourself to be in that place, be open to whatever the other person is expressing. Because we don't know to what level of emotion that they're willing to be vulnerable at. And they could even just be testing the waters, per se. And okay, is this person going to be very reactive, or are they just going to be completely aloof to everything that I say? And it's showing the empatheticness and allowing them and creating with them. Because like anything, it's a partnership between two people. To allow that space to be created of vulnerability, so both parties can then open up. Like I said earlier, I had a conversation with a friend of mine abroad, and we're in such a position now that we don't talk every day. But I can drop him a voice note, or I can pick up the phone and call him and just completely vent out, and he'll turn around and say, okay, that's great, so what's the plan for the weekend? And as blasé as it may sound, for me it's fantastic, because I vented it out, I got whatever I needed to out, and now I'm just normal me again, and vice versa. We have that on both sides. And especially for guys, there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable, no matter whatever age you may be. And that
there is also that gender bias.
Yeah, and it's great for us, because myself, Jags, Nins, the two behind the video as well, we just sit back sometimes and think human race is super weird. The more you figure it out, the more we confuse ourselves about it. Especially from a men's point of view, that we're too busy, we have to attain, we have to protect, provide, profess. The usual threes that all guys trying to do to, but at what point did we forget to be vulnerable? At what point did blokes forget to cry? There's nothing wrong in it. Like, yeah, okay, you want to cry in your own room so no one thinks that you're non-mature, that's fine, but find an avenue where you can let it out.
Otherwise the pressure cooker is going to pop at some time.
Yeah, if it's like my one, it needs changing on a regular basis.
Right. So essentially what we call, in coaching, we call this, unconditional positive regard. Just like hold space for the other person to be as openly vulnerable, or whatever they are sharing, non-judgmental, and just let them be. And you don't have to actually solve anything for them, and you can just be there and be empathetic at that point in time based on what conversation is happening.
Yeah, sometimes just by listening itself, from them talking about whatever it is that they are dealing with, they will get the answer themselves through like open expressive. I know I've had it once or twice where I think, actually, that's an idea. Why didn't I try that? Friends would like, see? I'm like, but you didn't tell me anything. We didn't need to. It's exactly like you said, you're holding a space for the other person. It's like a blank canvas wall where you're expressing, you're talking, you're getting one with your thoughts.
Right.
And now you can openly visually see it floating into the air, where you can then think, great, that's an idea. Let me potentially give that a try.
True. Prakash, thank you so much. Is there anything that you would want to leave the listeners with on vulnerability, if there's anything we've not touched upon yet?
Not really. I mean, all I can say is that other than what I've already said, there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. At any point of life, be it at work, be it outside work, but it's more about creating that space for yourself to be vulnerable, but also to be happy, excited, be everything that you want to be, wherever you want to be. Because if one area of your life is not quite working, none of your areas of life are working. Because those emotions follow you everywhere. And the common factor is you look after number one. Yeah, you have to be a little selfish from time to time. But there's nothing wrong in being empathetic, selfish, but also vulnerable at the same time. And if anyone is struggling just to even open up, or they don't know how to open up, we're always there if anyone wants to drop an email. And actually, a term I coined a couple of months ago through a conversation with a charity in India that I had is the rickshaw technique. Exactly like you've just done. Everyone was like, hey, what is this? Are you mad? But it's that same thing, right? We've all been on our famous rickshaw, and we've had lots of fantastic journeys and experiences with the rickshaw where they're broken down sometimes, or they just won't start. And what do? They pull the lever. Some of the modern ones not so much nowadays, but it's like conversations. You keep pulling the starter motor. It may not work straight away, so they shake the entire thing to give it a good wiggle, and then they do it again, and then it starts a little and stops, and then they do it again, and it starts a bit more, and then a bit more, and then eventually it gets going. And conversations are like that. Sometimes with people, you have to start with small little droplets, but continue having those conversations, because they will never get easy unless you build the foundations for it to get to them. And sometimes you have to have these small little uncomfortable conversations in order to get the free-flowing, loving, empathetic, vulnerable conversations that we all want.
Right, that's a beautiful analogy. I'm going to use that somewhere, but that's lovely, right? You have to start in spurts and actually get to that free-flowing, smooth conversations eventually. Beautiful. Great, Prakash. Thank you so much for this conversation. We always ask this one question to all our guests. So being miraculous, we keep talking about living life to the fullest, right? And very late into that conversation, I realized living life to the fullest means a lot of different things to different people. So the conversations that we have with guests, we usually ask this one question saying, what does living life to the fullest mean to you? What would that be for you?
See, I've been asked this a couple of times, and it doesn't get easier to answer. Because I think it's a very conceptual idea, and it's also very individual. So today you ask me, I may give one answer. You ask me the same thing next week, I may give a completely different answer. But I think for me, it's just following the path and being very present to it. Just be mindful of the path that you're on and enjoy the journey, the good, the bad. So for me, one of the best things that I love doing is going for walks. And I've been known to disappear for hours on end, and I could just be in the local village walking around 3, 4, 5 hours. But for me, it just gives me that space to switch off.
Right.
So for me, living life to the full is just really connecting with myself and just really getting present to what emotions may be there, what thoughts, feelings, ideas are going on in my head, which sometimes we're so busy we don't give ourselves that chance to be with ourselves and having some me time, as they would say. So yeah, for me, I think living miraculously, living endlessly the way I would want is just being really content with what you have. And for me, this could even come down to the experiences and what I've grown up with, just appreciating and valuing the simple things in life. For me, it's about just being present now. So if someone wants to talk, stop, have a couple of moments, talk, because you never know, tomorrow that may not come.
Right. Enjoying the present, being mindful, and appreciating the little things.
We spend too much time saying, oh, this happened and then that happened, but then this happened. But all you're actually doing is you're talking about the past, but you're putting it in the future. You're not creating the future that you want. You're using your past and putting it in the future. So your future is reflecting your past. So now it's just the point of, okay, what happened. Deal with what actually happened rather than the emotional side of it. But also appreciate and understand the emotions of it. And once you neutralize that point, to be able to step forward and just embrace whatever life has to offer.
Great. Thank you so much, Prakash. Thank you so much for openly sharing your thoughts and feelings, and for bringing up this insight on embracing vulnerability. I think I always love our conversations, and it's great having you here. And I'm sure the listeners will also find value through this conversation. For all of you listening, I would definitely map the link to officialthisisme.com on the show notes as well. So you should be able to catch it and watch the documentary. Thank you so much, Prakash, for being here.
Thank you for having me.